Yeah, he was very problematic. I kept changing him. He's a child in a way. He's raised in an all-female, well, pretty well an all-female society. So in some ways that was easy because I could just do anything I wanted with him. On the other hand, it was much harder because I had no guidelines. And it made me really try to examine what is essentially male, what is essentially female, what really does the Y chromosome and male hormones make men do, what really does the X chromosome and female hormones make us do, what are those differences.
So how did the boy turn out?
With Daniel, I wind up being very sympathetic to him. And in some of the earlier drafts of the novel, he was less sympathetic. I made him much more whiny and complaining. In fact, I've had some people say that I should have had at least another male character developed in detail that wasn't sympathetic, which is ironic because in my last novel, Zero Avenue, I've had complaints that there weren't enough sympathetic male characters. So, I don't know, you just can't win.
No, you can't. Thanks, Leona. In 1975, 12 SF writers took part in a written symposium on feminism in SF. One of the writers was asked to withdraw because the women writers found his personality too irritating. His name was James Tiptree Jr., or his pen name was. His real name was Alice Sheldon. Addressing a problem as deep as sexism is difficult, but is that why so few men try, or is it because men simply don't understand women? And do women understand men? Lois, sorry to bother you again, but do you find it difficult to write believable male characters?
Well, apparently not. I have never had any complaints back yet from fans that complained about the validity or the convincingness of the male characters. And I don't know how it is I'm doing this. It's not really a conscious process. Certainly there's an enormous amount of evidence, if you're a female writer in front of you, evidence in front of you about how to construct male characters. First of all, there's all the male characters you've read in fiction written by male writers. Right. There's all your personal experiences with fathers, husbands, brothers, friends, teachers, and all that. So it seems to me there's no valid reason not to be able to do a male viewpoint. You're kind of steeped in it. I don't know why some male writers have trouble working it the other way, why they have trouble doing female viewpoints. It's like, haven't they been paying attention? They've been surrounded by women all their lives. How can they have not noticed?
It may be more of a case of deliberately ignored. Thanks, Lois. If science fiction is acknowledging women, fantasy fiction is still in the Dark Ages. Maybe because so much of it is set in the Dark Ages. Hard to burn a bra if it's made of iron. Forging ahead, Karen Wehrstein writes fantasy alone and as part of a trio. Karen, it's Commander Rick. When you write with Shirley Meyer and Steve Sterling, do you write mostly the female characters?
A lot of my work concentrates on male characters. For me, doing a female, strange as it may sound, doing a female character would be a challenge.
Really? Aren't your interests and viewpoint a woman's viewpoint?
The way I recall being brought up in our society as it was then in the early 60s and then the late 60s and so on, it seemed to me that the guys did all the interesting stuff. And you know, your average grade school textbook, your boys are always going off on adventures and doing this and it's exciting stuff, right? And while the girls sit back and oh, you know, isn't that nice and watch? And so I don't think I wanted to identify with that. And so in my fantasy world, I didn't. I just, you know, okay, I'll write about male characters who go off and have adventures, which I think are interesting.
Thanks, Karen. I know, let's call Tanya Huff. She writes fantasy. She also works at BACA, Canada's first and foremost science fiction and fantasy bookstore. Tanya, c'est moi. In the old days, fantasy was about as liberated as a football locker room. Have things improved?
McCaffrey becoming such a big name in the mid-70s brought a lot of women my age into the field. There has since been a lot of women being done as swordswomen, as wizards, as women. I had actually ran into a little bit of sexism in this book here. The way I originally wrote it, Chandra and Darvish could not, anybody who hasn't read this book, forget this at this moment, because I'm going to give something away. Chandra and Darvish could not get married because Chandra would lose her power when she lost her virginity. And my editor, who's a woman, said that that's an extremely sexist attitude because what you're saying is being a woman depowers you. doing the things that women do, having children, having families, depowers you. And it does in this world today. This is a fantasy. I don't have to follow this world's rules. And so I took it out and I changed it.
Good idea. Thanks, Tanya. I'll leave you with two thoughts on women and what they bring to science fiction and comics. The first is something Canadian SF writer Terry Green said when we were talking a few days ago.
The very nature of our bodies makes us different in a profound sense. And that seems to me self-evident again. A woman gives birth to the child, carries the child for 9 months, nurtures the child from her body after the child is born. If that doesn't create a different kind of wisdom about life and everybody's role in life than the man's does, whose function is quite different than that and tries to take part in the process completely differently, there has to be a different wisdom that evolves from that. And I leave it to the women out there to articulate exactly what that is, but I can see that it has to be different.
Of course women are interested in other women and in children. I mean, that's our world, and there's nothing wrong with that world. I've been brought up to think that was a petty world because male values say that's a petty world. Male values say what is important is men fighting and striving and at war, you know, and conquering. Women don't think that way. You know, in a society where men drew women and children and women drew superheroes, women and children comics would be considered very, very important, and superhero comics would be considered petty and banal.
Next week on Second Nature, George Bush vows to destroy Colombia's drug crop using insects. The Pentagon unveils its $50,000 high-tech, laser-guided smart moth. Plus, the power of tides. Which is stronger, scented or new unscented?